Oi, what's happening, everybody? It's your Uncle Weezy coming at you on Friday, April 23rd with an advanced stats breakdown on the three title fights that are coming up tomorrow night for UFC 261. We got Usman versus Mosbidal, we got Zhang versus Namajunas, and we have got Shevchenko versus Andrade. I want to say what's up to all the DFS by the Numbers Patreon members. I'm going to take you through the advanced stats that we have on Brady's model here on the advanced stats tab, which is right down here. And I'm also going to take you through the new matchup template, which is debuting this week, which kind of gives you some looks at statistics side by side, so you can kind of have all the statistics in one place and analyze a fight by a number of different metrics, which will be available and we'll talk about coming up now. So let's take a dive into the stats here, and we'll start with the main event, Kamaru Guzman versus Jorge Mossmadel. So we'll start right up here with the tail of the tape. Look at the measurables. We got Kamaru has probably got the advantages here for the entire tail of the tape. We can see that he is 3 years younger than Jorge. You can see he's an inch taller and has a 2-inch reach advantage. Fights out of a switch stance, and Jorge is an orthodox fighter. And when we go to pro experience, here's where we see a little bit of a difference, and that is Jorge Mossmadel. This is going to be his 50th professional fight, and this is going to be Kamaru Usman's 20th. We can see that 35-14 is the professional career record here for Mosbidal, while Kamaru Guzman is 18-1. Total cage time, 249 minutes for Kamaru Guzman and 571 and a half minutes for Jorge Mossmadel. This guy has been around. He's fought everybody. This is number 50. He really has fought everybody, and he has been around a long time. And you got to wonder if there's a little too much tread on those tires at this point in his career, because Kamaru Guzman has only been in the game for a little over 8 years. And we do have the career lengths right down here. We see 17 years and 10 months for Jorge Mossmadel, and it's less than half of that, for Kamaru. And then we look at the UFC experience, and we see that Mosbidal's got 19 UFC fights up here, and Kamaru's got 13. We got 13-0. He's still undefeated in the UFC, while Mosbidal is 12-7. We see the cage time is actually similar, about 220 for Kamaru and about 245 for Jorge. The fight time a little bit longer. Kamaru not much of a finisher, 16.83 minutes, while we got Jorge at 13.03. Kamaru fighting out of Sanford MMA. Jorge Mossmadel, American Top Team. And we'll go over to the finish stats here, and we can see that Kamaru Guzman has finished 50% of his overall wins, 44 by KO, 6% by sub. And Mosbidal has a 57% career finish rate, only 6% by sub, 51% by KO. So we can see that these guys tend to finish fights the same way when they do finish them. They're not much of submission guys. They do finish it with ground and pound for Kamaru, and for knockouts, obviously Mosbidal has the ability to do that on the feet. Losses. We see that 3 out of 14 career losses for Jorge have been by finish, only 21%. He's notoriously hard to finish. Kamaru Usman's only career loss was by submission, so that's 100% sub rate, but only one loss. So we see the overall, this is the wins and the losses over here, and we see that the numbers are pretty similar. Now we can get into the striking stats, and we can see here Kamaru Guzman has landed 1,020 significant strikes thus far in the UFC out of 1,881 thrown. Mosbidal 1,033 for 2,082. And we look here at this is the significant strikes landed and the significant strikes thrown per minute. So you can see not only who lands more, but who's busier. And we see that Kamaru 4.66 out of 8.59, that's per minute, and Mosbidal 4.17 out of 8.41 per minute. Kamaru's 54% striking accuracy, 49.62 for Jorge. And we see that the knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, we see Jorge Mossmadel just a little bit under 1% here at 0.0087. And surprisingly, Kamaru Usman's power numbers really not far behind Mosbidal's here, where he's at 0.0069. That's 0.55 knockdowns per 15 minutes for Mosbidal and 0.48 for Kamaru. So, we do know that Mosbidal is the better stand-up distance striker here. But when we look at the numbers, I think they reflect, especially for Kamaru, the fact that he does, he's pretty accurate because he does land a lot of his significant strikes on the ground, where it's a little bit easier to be accurate. Um, we'll look here in the grappling stats a little bit later on, but you can tell here that the control time is 52.71% for Kamaru. So he spends more than half of his time on the cage or with his opponent's back on the mat. So this guy doesn't spend as much time distance striking in the center of the cage as Jorge Masvidal does. Let's hit the striking defense numbers here. We see 509 out of 1231 for Usman's opponents. That's 2.33 significant strikes landed per minute out of 5.62. And we see that Jorge, he absorbs 3 significant strikes per minute out of 7.18. Jorge Mossmadel showed a 58.18% striking defense, quite solid. And same thing for Usman, 58.65. We can see that Usman has never been knocked down in the UFC, so he's got a 0% knockdown against rate. And Jorge, 0.0067, so about 2/3 of 1% of the strikes landed against Jorge result in a knockdown. That's 0.3 for 15 minutes, certainly not what we would call chinny. And then let's go to the grappling stats here. We see 47 out of 99. Kamaru Usman's takedown attempts have been successful, 47.47%. He averages 3.22 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he averages 0.14 submission attempts per 15 minutes, 52.71% control time. That is very dominant. That means that his opponents really only get to spend about less than half the time of the fights in the center of the cage trying to box him, which is where most people will have their advantage over Kamaru, but he simply doesn't allow you to fight there. He doesn't feel like fighting where you're comfortable. He fights where he's comfortable. And when we look into the advanced stats, we're going to see that in much greater detail because this guy's numbers are very dominant. And then we also see here Kamaru Usman, if we look at the grappling defense numbers, 100% takedown defense thus far in the UFC. His opponents have been 0 of 20 on takedown attempts. They only average 0.34 submission attempts per 15 minutes, and they only control Kamaru Usman 1.4% of the time. Jorge Masvidal, his opponents have been successful on 25 of 99 takedowns. That is a 74.75% takedown defense. Very impressive. But you could see though, even though he's successfully defending about 75% of those takedowns, his opponents still take him down about 1.5 times per 15 minutes. So people are trying to take down Jorge because they know he's not as comfortable on the ground, and they know he's much more comfortable standing. I don't think Kamaru Usman is going to give him much time to feel comfortable in this fight. We see that he has been controlled 20.95% of the time. And he's had about 1.12 submission attempts attempted against him. Let's look at the strength of schedule for both fighters. The overall, we start down here at the ratio. We see that Kamaru Usman's opponents overall in his 13 UFC fights have had a 2.43 wins to loss ratio outside of their fights with Kamaru. And we see for Jorge Mossmadel, it's 1.83. We see that Jorge Masvidal's opponents have had a total of 15.37 average fights. So, he's fighting the slightly more experienced fighter, but Kamaru, 13.46. His opponents are also very, very experienced. They've had plenty of UFC fights. He's not really getting any easy fights either, obviously. And he's the champion now, so he's always getting the number one contender. So we see that Kamaru Usman has fought a little bit tougher competition. I mean, it's going to be the same for the wins for him because he doesn't have any losses. We see the average ratio of the guy that Masvidal beats in his wins, 1.58, so a little bit worse than the 1.83. So Masvidal is somewhat predictable in that, when he fights somebody with a 2.47 win-to-loss ratio, those are the fights that he loses. So the average record of the fighter that Jorge Masvidal beats is 9.58 wins and 6 losses. And the average record of the guy that Jorge Mossmadel loses to, 10.57 wins, 4.29 losses. He'll be facing a 13-0 fighter tomorrow night. So let's take a look at the advanced statistics here. And take a look at Kamaru Usman. We see 19 professional fights, 8 by KO, 1 by sub. 4.99 DraftKings points per minute. That's crazy. He averages 123 points per fight, and he only allows 1.13 DraftKings points per minute. So, I mean, like, this guy is outscoring his opponents by more than a 4-to-1 ratio in DraftKings. That's how dominant he is. And if we look down here, we do see his whole list of opponents. We see nothing but wins here in the win-loss column. And, we see a lot of takedown attempts in the fights that he needs to take people down. But, like, for instance, when he fought Gilbert Burns here, 0 takedown attempts. But when he fought Jorge Mossmadel, 16 takedown attempts. Colby Covington, 0 takedown attempts. Woodley, 6. Dos Anjos, 18. Maia, 0. Emil Meck, 19 takedown attempts. So you can see here that Kamaru is always going to keep that fight where he's the most comfortable. Those are the guys you want to bet on. Those are the guys that aren't going to do stupid things. They're not going to stand in the middle of the cage and bang with somebody that has more power than them. They're not going to go to the mat with, a jiu-jitsu world champion that could easily submit them. This guy fights smart. He does what he needs to do in order to win. And then if we look at Mosbidal's numbers here, we can take a look and see. Let's take a look at when Mosbidal has had to face opponents that have tried to take him down a lot. So we'll go to these are the, when we scroll over to the right here, these are the Mosbidal's opponent stats. And we can see here is a fight where he had 16 takedown attempts. And then here's one where he had 12 takedown attempts against. Here's another one with 12. Here's one with 14. Here's one with 10. And here's one with 9. So let's take a look, because we know, right, that Kamaru Guzman is going to try to take this guy down early and often. Let's look at how Jorge Mossmadel has fared in these fights. 16 takedown attempts, 12 takedown attempts, 12, 9, 14, and 10. All right, so let's scroll back here. And we can look at the highlighted rows and see whether he won and lost these fights. L, 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 W, and L. So in the 6 fights in the UFC career of Mosbidal, where he has faced 9 or more takedown attempts, he is 1-5, with the lone win being against Pat Healy, who had an 0-5 with 1 no contest UFC record. So, Mosbidal is clearly struggling with people who will grapple him. He's clearly most comfortable in situations where he's not being controlled for long periods of the fight, and he's not spending long periods of time on his back. That is not going to be how Kamaru Guzman fights him. Kamaru Guzman is going to wrestle him. Kamaru Guzman is going to try to put his back on the cage. He's going to try to put his back on the mat and keep Jorge where he is least dangerous. And I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag right here. I got this down as my ass shaving of the night. And it's no disrespect to Jorge Mossmadel. The guy's an amazing fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters. He's fun to watch. But Kamaru Guzman is so dominant in what he does that I feel very comfortable suggesting to you that you can put your money on this guy and feel very safe, because he's gonna do what he needs to do in order to get the W. And those are the guys that you want to gamble on. So that is your breakdown for the first fight, or the last one, I should say, of the night. Let's step now to Zhang Namajunas. We got Thug Rose against Zhang Wei Li. Go to the tail of the tape here. We see that Rose is younger, 3 years younger, 28 as opposed to 31. She's 1 inch taller, and she has a 2-inch reach advantage. She's an orthodox fighter, while Zhang Wei Li fights out of switch stance. So in the measurables, we'd say that Rose has a slight advantage here. Let's look at the pro experience. We see that Zhang Wei Li, 22 total fights to Rose's 13. Rose is 9-4, while Zhang is 21-1, and Zhang is on a 21-fight win streak. She lost her first fight of her pro career. You see that Zhang Wei Li has more career cage time, 174 to Rose's 154. The average fight time about 12 minutes for Rose, and it's about 8 minutes for Zhang. So Zhang is obviously the more prolific finisher. And interesting stat here, and we see that the length of career for Zhang, 7 years, 5 months. And for Rose, it's 8 years, 3 months. But we can see that Zhang has been the far more active fighter, despite the fact that she's fought about her career has been about a year shorter. She's got 9 more fights. She's averaging about 3 fights a year. So this is a fighter that has been very, very active, Zhang, and it hasn't been so much for Rose. The number of UFC fights, Rose obviously has a little more experience, 10 fights as opposed to Zhang's 5. Rose is 7-3 in the UFC opposed to 5-0 for Zhang. Has about twice as much cage time as Zhang as well, with about 60 minutes for Zhang and about 125 for Rose. The average UFC fight time about the same. Zhang coming out of the Black Tiger Fight Club, while Rose is coming out of the 303 Training Center. Zhang Weili, the more prolific finisher, having finished 81% of her pro wins, while it's been 2/3 for Rose. While Rose has been finished in 2 out of her 4 pro losses, while Zhang Weili has never been finished. And we see that Zhang, just the more prolific finisher as a whole. As far as striking stats go, we see that Zhang Weili is the more active striker at 14.5 strikes per minute, 6.38 landed, while Rose is about at 4.13 out of 10.15. So about 5% more accurate is Zhang. We do see that Rose 0.0058 on the knockdown per total significant strikes landed. Zhang's about half that. So Rose has shown a little more power in her UFC time. 0.25 knockdowns per 15 minutes for Zhang, 0.36 for Rose. As far as knockdowns against, neither one of these fighters has ever been knocked down. So they are both extremely tough. Thug Rose shows the better striking defense here at 60.5%, as opposed to Weili at 53.78. That has been one of the criticisms against Weili, is that she is a little more hittable than some people are saying. And, certainly Joanna took advantage of that, and that was a war. And Joanna hit her a lot. And people are thinking that if Rose does manage to hit her, that it's going to hurt a lot more than when Joanna hit her. So that'll be interesting to see, because this could be a very close fight on the feet. And with Rose having that 2-inch reach advantage, we could potentially see her having some success on the feet if Zhang hasn't figured out how to move that head a little bit more. The grappling stats. You see that Zhang Weili has been 5 out of 21 on her career takedowns in the UFC, while Rose has been 16 out of 30. A little over 50%. That's really good, while Zhang's been 23%. Zhang averages 1.26 takedowns per 15 minutes, while Rose 1.91. Rose has been a little bit more active with her sub-attempts at 0.84 as opposed to 0.51. And we'll see Zhang 15.52% control time, while Rose has controlled her opponents 22.67% of the time. Zhang Weili, and this is very important, 0 for 3. Her opponents have only tried to take her down 3 times, but still 100% takedown defense. And I think a lot of people do think that Rose probably has a grappling advantage, and she's probably going to want to get this fight to the ground at some point or try to get on her back, sink in a choke. So it should be noted that Zhang, even though she has only faced 3 takedown attempts, that she's 100% with her takedown defense. We see that Rose's opponents have taken her down 1.08 times per 15 minutes and have attempted only 0.12 submission attempts against her. She's only been controlled 8.49% of the time, while Zhang's opponents have only controlled her 5% of the time. So they've both been very hard to control. We've got Zhang with the slightly better ratio overall here, with 1.94 to 1.78. Average record of Zhang's opponents, 6.6 wins, 3.4 losses, while it's been 8 and 4.5 for Rose. So Rose has fought the slightly worse ratio, but has fought the slightly more experienced competition. Rose's wins have come against fighters with a ratio of 2 to 1, while Zhang's have come against 1.94. So Rose's wins have actually been slightly better than Zhang's, but Zhang only has 5 fights. So Rose has fought the consistently tougher level of competition because she's had twice as many fights and because she's been a champion before. And we see that Rose's opponents that have beaten her are at an average record of 7.33 and 5.33, 12.67 total fights with a ratio of 1.38. If we go do a little deeper dive into the stats here, we can see what's going on with Weili, 21-1. Wins over Danielle Taylor, Jessica Aguilar, Tisha Torres, Jessica Andrade, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. We see that, she can land a ton of strikes in a 5-round fight, 165. But, we also see that she absorbed 186 from Joanna. And Joanna was over 50% striking against her. So, yeah, definitely she's hittable. We see that Weili's 5 for 21 on takedown attempts. She doesn't go for her wrestling all that much, but when she does tend to get it about 25% of the time. You can see here the DraftKings numbers. Weili scores about 3.79 points per 15 minute or per minute, while only allowing 1.92. She's basically doubling up the score of her opponents while she's in the cage. Very active, really putting it on her opponents. And go down here to Rose. See that she's had 10 fights, so Jessica Andrade twice, Joanna Jędrzejczyk twice, Michelle Waterson, Carolina Kovalkiewicz, Torres, Van Zant, Hill. From the very first fight, Rose has fought everybody in this division, and she's done very well. A loss to Carolina Kovalkiewicz is very surprising. She lost to Carla Esparza. She lost to Jessica Andrade. This is going to be a hell of a fight, and we just looked at the numbers, it doesn't look like there's a huge numbers advantage here for Weili. We know she's about a -200 favorite. She has the least chance of winning amongst the three favorites in the championship fights, according to the bookies. Is Kamaru's like -435, and Valentina's right about the same. So this is definitely the one that the bookies see as the closest, and you can see by looking at the numbers, that Rose has fought the tougher competition. She's been around in the UFC longer. She's fought a greater variety of opponents, and this should be a very interesting fight. I am picking Weili. I just see her being a little too strong. I think her takedown defense does hold up, and I think that her conditioning will probably make the difference over a 5-round fight. I do see her coming out and winning this, but I'm not nearly as confident as I am in the other two. So let's go to the last title fight of the night right here, which is going to be Shevchenko versus a very handsome woman in Jessica Andrade with a haircut that you could set your watch to. Let's look at the measurables here. We see that Valentina is older, 33 as opposed to 29. She's 4 inches taller, and it's got a 4-inch reach advantage. Southpaw versus orthodox. We see the pro fights. Jessica, a little more experienced, 29 pro fights to Valentina's 23. 21-8 for Jessica, 20-3 for Valentina. 2 of those losses being to Amanda Nunes. The cage time overall very similar, 260, 285. Jessica Andrade's fights a little bit shorter at 9.83 as opposed to 11.26. Very interesting number here. Look at the length of career for Valentina Shevchenko. 17 years, 11 months. She's almost been fighting for 18 years. And then you go and look at her age over here, 33. That means that this woman took her first professional fight when she was 15 years old. This woman was clearly born to do this. Valentina has 11 UFC fights, while Jessica Andrade has 18. So we see that Jessica Andrade is, about 2/3 of her pro fights have been in the UFC cage. She's got a 12-6 record overall, as opposed to Valentina 9-2. Cage time very similar. The average UFC fight time, Jessica Andrade a little more prone to finish than Valentina at 16.4 minutes. Valentina fighting out of Tiger Muay Thai and Piranha Vale Tudo for Jessica Andrade. The finish stats, very similar here. Very similar by KO, by sub, and overall. They both finish about 2/3 of their fights, and about 1/3 by sub, and about 1/3 by KO. Jessica Andrade has been finished in 63% of her losses, though. That's 5 out of 8 losses. While for Shevchenko it's only been 1 out of 3 times, and even Amanda Nunes couldn't finish her. So Valentina has been notoriously hard to finish. So we see the sub numbers. very much the same for both of these fighters. Valentina, let's see, 3.15 significant strikes landed per minute, while throwing 6.21. We see that Jessica has been far more active, the far busier striker, 6.38 out of 12.76. The accuracy about the same, and the power similar. Valentina not showing a ton of power, 0.0018 knockdown per total significant strikes landed, while Jessica not too much better at 0.0026. About 0.25 knockdowns per 15 minutes for Jessica, while we got 0.08 for Valentina. And we see that, Valentina, even though she's not very busy, we see that she's notoriously hard to hit. Only absorbs 2.14 significant strikes per minute. She's clearly a defensive genius. 63% striking defense. And that's going to really be the biggest, I think, difference in this fight is she's just so hard to hit. And you see that while Jessica is landing 6.38. She's absorbing 5.26. So she's absorbing almost as much as she's giving out. While, Valentina's, giving out about a third more than she's absorbing. So the ratio there is much different. And I think Andrade is going to be very frustrated trying to find ways to hit Valentina. She's just not there to be hit. We see the takedown percentage, very similar here. Valentina averages 2.33 takedowns per 15 minutes, while Jessica just north of 3. And they're both about the same sub-attempts for 15 minutes here. And the control time, very similar. Jessica Andrade has been a little bit harder to control at 8.44 control time against as compared to Valentina, 14%. But, Valentina, to be fair, has fought Amanda Nunes twice. So the grappling defensive numbers, very similar. If Jessica wants to try to take down Valentina, she's got 76% takedown defense, and the same thing. If Valentina wants to take down Jessica, it's going to be difficult. If we look at the stats here, we see that Valentina has fought the much tougher ratio at 2.39 as opposed to 1.43 for Jessica. And not only has she fought the tougher, win-loss ratio of fighters, but 9.55 fights as opposed to 9.06. So not only more, higher winning percentage, but also more experienced. The wins are similar, 1.7 for Valentina as opposed to 1.41 for Jessica. So Jessica's wins have been almost as good as Valentina's. And we see that the losses, the average record of the fighter that, that Valentina loses to is 14-2. So, she loses to the cream of the crop, Amanda Nunes, and even those are split decision the second time. So, this is a fight I think we got. I'm going to call this one for Valentina. Jessica Andrade does have that puncher's chance. She's got a ton of power. She's very explosive, but I just don't think Valentina is going to allow her to land that big shot. We see here Valentina is scoring about 3.33 DraftKings points per minute, while only averaging about 1.84. So she's not quite doubling up her opponents, but has been pretty dominant. We see this list of opponents here. Kaufman, Nunes, Holm, Juliana Pena, Amanda Nunes, Priscilla Ketchabeating, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Jessica Ai, Carmouche, Chookagian, Maya, Andrade will be the next one. She's fought, a number of really difficult opponents, and obviously Amanda Nunes for only 2 losses. When we look at Andrade, she's scoring 4.8 DraftKings points per minute, so she is explosive. Only giving up 2.9, 12-6 UFC record, former champion at 115 pounds. She's fought at 135 pounds earlier in her career here between the years of 2013 and 2015, before there was a strawweight or a flyweight weight class. She was fighting at 135, moved down to 115, and now she's up to 125. So she's fought in all 3 of these weight classes, fought a who's who. We can go through the names: Caitlin, Rose, Zhang, Rose, Carolina, Tisha, Claudia, Jędrzejczyk, Angela Hill, Calderwood, Pennington, Penne, Morass, Renault, Pacheco, Pennington again, Rose Sexton, Liz Carmouche. Just a who's who. She's fought everybody. This is going to be a hell of a fight. 2 veterans, 2 explosive fighters, 2 really fun to watch fighters. But I just think that Valentina is going to be too much. So Just want to send a shout out to my man DFS by the Numbers. Thank you for letting me add this content to your Patreon. Hope the Patreon members are finding this kind of content valuable. I'm looking forward to providing more of this content in the future. If you have any suggestions on how I can improve the advanced stats model or the matchup template, let me know. Holler at me in the Discord. Comment on the video if you like the video. If you found it helpful, give me a thumbs up. Anyway, I wish all you guys luck on Saturday. Let's all make some money. God bless you all, and thank you for listening. Good night.